It's my understanding we're still missing a juror, so we can't get started yet, but I thought maybe we could take the time to talk about these medical records exhibits. Have you guys made any progress about this conversation?
Some progress.
Good.
At least I think we know where we disagree and, well, where we disagree.
Keep talking. Is there anything you agree on? Maybe let's start there. How's that?
I don't know. I think that's a question better suited for the state because the state knows what I'm proposing.
Okay.
I don't think that there's, in all honesty, I'm not sure, Judge. I don't think there's a single record that they're agreeing to. But maybe I'm wrong.
I think a little bit more accurate description would be that the state understands the purpose for which defense wants them in. The state will continue with its standing objection to that purpose, but recognizing the court's prior comments on the records, we are prepared to discuss what would be admissible based on the court's prior comments. And with that, when Mr. Conrad was before the court last time, and I had the transcript from that, he indicated that the highlighted versions were what he wanted in. When we met yesterday, he told me, well, those were the important parts, but he wants more in than what's highlighted. And so when I had initially gone through it, I went through it with the understanding that the highlighted is what he wanted in, and what our objection would be to that, but what we anticipated the court's ruling would be on it. And after last night's meeting, it looks like he wants more than that in. There's a couple of things that the state would want to add to a few of the records, and I think Mr. Conrad, for the most part, agrees to those few paragraphs. But from the state's perspective, Your Honor, I recognize he wants in the auditory hallucinations, the methamphetamine use, some of the chest pain, and some of the schizophrenia. And, you know, has multiple exhibits addressing those issues, and I don't understand why we can't have 2 or 3 which address that, and it provides for the corroborating the defense theory, and it satisfies what's been requested. And as the court noted, the more and more you keep going through the same thing here, it does get to be cumulative. I recognize that you said that wasn't the proper objection that you would likely rule it under, but how many times do we have to hear that he's been using meth since he was, you know, a teenager, and that he used it routinely? He has the records from 2019. Let's see. Well, first I think we could exclude 2004. The court specifically said on the record last time that you didn't see any relevance to that one. Defense didn't have the transcript.
Which exhibit? Which exhibit number?
2004. I guess it would be 2004A.
Okay.
On page 17 of your transcript, you had gone through it and said you didn't see any relevance to it, which the state agrees with.
Yeah, there was a business here about him having a foot injury and a gunshot wound, I guess, to his foot or to his leg. It wasn't clear what that was all about.
I'm fine with redacting that.
Well, redacted, she wants to eliminate it. Is there something in it that you want?
Yes, sir.
What is it that you want?
Some base training medical expert 4429.
442.
Manuel
Wait a minute, hold on.
Ellis.
4427. Okay. Very small print here. Okay. 4429. Mm-hmm.
That last paragraph there.
What do you want? What do you want about this? The auditory hallucinations?
Yeah, and that it's tied to methamphetamine use.
But then what about the rest of that paragraph.
There's one other thing within this, 4433.
Oh, you're moving to another page. I'm going on, what about the rest of that paragraph that we were just looking at, 4429?
Oh, I mean, if the state wants to redact that his foot's swollen and red and all that stuff, I don't have any objection to that.
And Your Honor, for the state's position, there hasn't been any testimony regarding this. This is from July 25th of 2015. It's documented in records later, which have similar information, which we've actually heard testimony from. And when he goes to the uncontrolled hypertension, again, there hasn't been any testimony regarding that. That ties it to anything. It's just putting records in front of you for you to help.
What about the 4433? That's what you want, the uncontrolled hypertension?
Yeah.
I believe that's what he wants.
I ended cross-examination, I think, with the majority of their experts by saying, Mr. Ellis said uncontrolled hypertension, correct? And say yes. Say, you see people die with uncontrolled hypertension. Say yes. He had cardiomyopathy. Yes. If you see people die with cardiomyopathy. Yes.
I don't believe this record was utilized for that, but I could be mistaken. But even if it was, he has that in there, and nobody disputed it. Well, uncontrolled hypertension.
We could spend 5 hours going through it at this pace.
I mean, the state waived it. I've given notice of these records a long time ago. Pursuant to the statute, the state waives any objection to that, the admissibility of them. So it really should just be a discussion between the court and the defense of this one. But the state keeps interjecting themselves in the conversation.
Well, I'm going to let him do that for a while longer.
Sure.
Maybe till the case is over.
Your Honor, I guess from the state's perspective also, and as I mentioned earlier, there are records that are more recent that contain similar information. I mean, if you look at Exhibit 984, for example, where it goes through these schizoaffective disorder, again, recognizing the state has a standing objection, I'm just going through it for the purpose
I
of
understand.
trying to get there.
Mm-hmm.
You look at this and he wants DIM 3, and that's going to be consistent with what the court previously stated is going to be admissible. The state's position is the first paragraph should be redacted for DIM 1, DIM 2 should be added, DIM 3 defense gets.
I'm not, you're looking, I don't have 984, so, or you said,
984.
oh, 984A,
Sorry. I
okay.
apologize, I have these listed based on what was said. So essentially, it's giving him the information that he wants regarding the meth use, the psychosis.
But the difference is that we're talking about this being a recurrent issue over a period of time. And that's why the state doesn't want the multiple instances of it that show this is a recurrent, ongoing issue. Then they're able to argue, oh, because it happens on this one time, as if it's some unexpected instance.
All right.
We know this is an ongoing issue since dating back to 2015.
Oh, I think I know how I'm going to resolve this.
Okay.
You already know from our last conversation, there's several items in here that need to be redacted further.
Correct.
Make those redactions.
Yes, sir.
You, on the other hand, need to make all whatever redactions you think are appropriate. And then I'll choose.
Okay.
Sounds good, Your Honor.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks. That'll speed things up a bit.
All right, did provide defense counsel. We went through them yesterday and this morning exactly what areas would be redacted. So we'll do the full redactions for the court. Do you want them marked so you can see what we're redacting, or do you want them like blacked out? I guess my point is, when the court reviews it, do you want to be able to see what our proposal is for what we're taking out versus you're getting it like this and you don't know what it is?
Well, presumably I've got this, and if they haven't blacked it out,
Okay.
then I can compare with that. So that should make your job a little easier.
Great, thank you.
All right, well, I'm not sure if we got our last juror here yet or not. But before we get started with that, there's a couple things, or at least a thing I want to talk about. Excuse me. We've had a conversation a little bit about courtroom decorum and so on, from time to time during the course of this trial. It does seem to me that people are letting their impulses get the best of them. I'm increasingly hearing little murmurs or whatever, based on one thing or another that's either testified to or a ruling from me or otherwise. And I don't much mind that if there was no jury present, because I can take whatever criticisms are of me, and I'm going to ignore whatever cheerleading there might be for one side or the other, although it certainly looks bad no matter what. But if the jurors can hear these remarks, it's potentially affecting their deliberations and their outcome and their decision making, and that's a problem. So we've got to keep it to yourselves. If you've got a problem of that, well, I'm sorry. If it continues, we may have to remove people from the courtroom. That's not the thing I want to do. So fair warning. One. Number two, it's come to me some information that there has been some emotional feelings outside the courtroom between people, and people are letting their emotions run on this. And I've had too many times where people get angry about something and words go back and forth between people, and the next thing you know, egos get in the way and nobody wants to back down, and the next thing you know, this thing escalates into something really serious and somebody gets hurt. Obviously, I can't control your behavior outside the courtroom, but I do want everybody to stay safe. And I can imagine, too, that anything that's said outside the courtroom can be brought into this courtroom in the sense of the emotions of it and so on. And we don't need any more of that than we have already. So I would urge you all to be circumspect in what you say, cautious, keep it to yourself. If you have emotions about this thing, express them elsewhere, but not in the presence of folks who are going to potentially take offense at it. And that goes for both sides. So, because it just wrangles people up, and the next thing you know, we have another tragic event, which I say we don't need. So hopefully that'll be taken to heart, and we won't have additional problems with it. Now, did you send Hannah to go check on the jury?
She was going to, and when the paperwork for something this morning, or something. Are they all here?
We're still missing a juror? Well, Mrs. Winquist, make an inquiry. I think you know who that might be, and see what you can do to find out what the status is with that juror. So we'll be at break until we, at least for a few more minutes, to figure out what's going on with the other juror that's no longer with us. Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Please be seated. Okay, cross-examine, Mr. Percher, when you're ready.
Yeah, thank you. Queue up to the 440, please. Officer, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, sir.
We want to take a look at Exhibit 440, which is the first and Cal video. It's got a couple of questions regarding
Yes, sir. You want me to step down? Or
Yeah, it might be easy. Okay, if you could roll this until we see the flash next to the police car. Go back to where you see the first flash. It's about 2 seconds in.
What kind of flash from what?
So that's
Well, where will we be?
okay. Go up just forward just a tad from that section. Right there. Fine. Officer, that is what depicted in the video.
What?
Well,
Are you talking about the sort of light there in the middle of the picture?
The light right there.
Okay.
It's hard to tell here whether it's a hand or a hand and a taser, but I know from, I think, further in this video, you can clearly see a taser out.
Oh, all right. You were asked yesterday, or you were suggested to you that Mr. Officer Burbank attacked Mr. Ellis. Correct? Right. Based upon the training that we received, and that Officer Burbank received, would that have been appropriate to attack a person with a taser in the hand?
No, sir.
And why is that?
So in taser training, you have to gain distance to pull the taser on. It's kind of like how I talked about with the firearm, because it's mine from this distance, but once we're close wrestling and I take it out, it's ours. So in our taser training at Tacoma, if we're taught if somebody gets control of your taser, you're to lethally engage them with the firearm, because now they can make you incapacitated with your taser, potentially grab your firearm, and now they're a threat to the public. So in our training, if somebody gets our taser, we have to engage with a firearm. So absolutely now you have to have distance before you use the tool.
All right. And shortly after, in this video, we actually see Officer Burbank using the taser on this video.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That's all the question I have.
Mr. Gunn?
I don't have any questions today.
Can you read right? Go ahead, Mr. Oster.
Good morning, Mr. Officer. I'm all right.
I'm going to work back from Ms. Seek's cross-examination yesterday through some areas that she touched on, okay?
Okay.
So she left off yesterday with Exhibit 77. With the court's permission, I'm going to approach you with Exhibit 77, okay? Is that okay?
Yes.
What's 77?
77 is the incident report from the St. James Apartments that we talked about.
And Ms. Seeks yesterday had you look through 77 to address the weight of Philman Sharp. Do you remember that?
I do, sir.
Because your testimony yesterday was he was about 150 pounds, and in that document it says 200 pounds. You remember that line of questioning?
I do.
At the bottom of Exhibit 77, are there bait stamps?
There is.
Do you know what a bait stamp is?
Yes, sir, I do.
What's a bait stamp?
It's a cataloging system for documents so that you know you have the complete issue of the document.
And what's the bait stamp on Exhibit 77?
Washington Attorney, so it's WAAG 0036296.
All right, and do you know what WAAG stands for?
Washington Assistant Attorney General.
All right, so do you know how those numbers are put on there and why they're put on there?
They're put on when you request documents from the Attorney General's office, so they stamp them so you know you're getting the completion of what they have.
All right,
And
so
they
that
say,
means that was provided to us from Ms. Eakes, right?
yes, sir.
Is that the entirety of the incident reports in 77 related to that incident?
It is not.
How many pages is Exhibit 77?
So what I have goes through the last three of 296 up into 307.
All right, is it 77 the .1 report that you created?
It is.
What's a .1 report?
So any incident where you have multiple officers, the lead officer, whoever is taking control of the case, will have the .1. It's like the main report, and then anyone else who's writing has .2s, 3s, 4s, whatever is next. So Burbank and I would switch off, and whatever. If the call was that I would just be in charge of it, then I would kind of cover the main probable cause for arrest and so on.
All right. And how many pages is your .1 report?
The actual without the CAD information on front of the whole thing.
Just 77 that Ms. Eakes decided she was going to show you.
So again, she gave me last three of 296 through 307.
And is that the 12 pages that are associated with your .1 report only?
Yes.
Are there other reports associated documenting your interaction with Mr. Sharp?
Yes, sir.
Were you provided those by Ms. Eakes?
No, sir.
Why not?
I do not know.
It's the same.
Well, with permission, I'm going to hand you this 2755.
Proceed.
What's 2755, Officer Collins?
So this looks like the full incident report that includes my report. So it goes through, again, 296 in the beginning through 320 at the end.
You know those all date stamps and provided by the Washington Attorney General's office?
Yes, sir, they are.
Are they sequential from Exhibit 77 through the rest of the reports associated with the contact with Mr. Sharp?
They are sequential, but they stop at basically where the CAD incident inquiry picks up.
Okay. And what else is included in 2755 other than 77, which is provided by Ms. Eakes?
So again, it's got the CAD incident inquiry. It's got my report, or Officer Burbank's report, and it's got a use of force supervisor report.
All associated with the contact with Mr. Sharp in 2017?
Yes, sir.
Yesterday, Ms. Eakes suggested that your testimony that you weighed 150 pounds was not accurate because of the entry into page 2 of your report. Can you tell us how you got that information for page 2 of your report?
Yeah. So again, that's when all of us get our driver's license, they ask you for your weight and everything, and that's what the weight is by the DOL. We don't actually weigh people when we arrest them. So whether or not they weigh exactly what their DOL says is dependent on a lot of things.
Right. And in your report, 77 that Ms. Eakes showed you yesterday, was there any documentation that Mr. Sharp appeared to be under the influence of any sort of narcotic?
And what she gave me yesterday?
Yes.
Yes. So I talked about his behavior, and then he was also found with heroin and other, I think, drug needles, maybe, possibly. He had like a kit with a bunch of stuff in it.
And with your training experience, does the use of heroin affect an individual's weight?
It does.
How so?
Well, they don't take care of themselves. They don't eat properly, and they tend to get very skinny and emaciated.
And did Mr. Sharp appear to be under the influence of heroin when you contacted him?
Not when we contacted him. He didn't.
Ms. Eakes suggested in Exhibit 77 that there's no documentation that Mr. Sharp whispered anything towards you and Mr. Burbank. Do you remember that line of questioning?
I'm gonna object to that misstates the questions that are asked.
I think it was having to do with whispering a death threat.
Does your 77 that she provided you document that he whispered threats towards you and Officer Burbank?
I'm going to refer to it really quickly.
To refresh your memory.
So your question again was directly, does my report reference threats to me? Is that what you asked me?
Right, so Ms. Heath suggested that you didn't document these threats that you testified to. Did this report actually document those threats?
It does.
And can you read those to the jury, please?
Okay, so I'm just starting in the middle of the last paragraph on 306. It was right after noticing this that arrestee 1 Shark became assaultive while standing up into us and attempting to pull his arms downward towards the waistline while driving his weight towards us. All the while, arrestee 1 Shark was staring at me with the same distant and calm glance and began to whisper to me, "Hey, is your partner a rookie? He feels like it." Shark then said, "You know how easily I could hurt you guys?" At this point, I had control of A1 Shark's arm. Just stop me, sir, if you want me to stop. But
Well, go ahead and stop right there. So there's a couple of things that you put in quotation marks in your report. Why'd you do that?
because that's directly what the subject said.
All right, so what were the quotes that you attributed to Mr. Sharp?
You know how easily I could hurt you guys? And I think that might be the only one.
All right. And in the Dot 2 report authored by your partner at the time, Officer Burbank, does he get the quotes, things that were whispered threats towards you from the report? I'll direct your attention to page 405, date stamps 36319 in the Washington Attorney General's office.
Give me 1 second, please.
Of course.
Yes, and at the bottom of 3.
Before you read it, does it indicate that he's whispering these threats to you as you testified to yesterday?
Yes, sir.
What does he whisper to you and Officer Burbank?
How close he is to killing us, and wanted to ensure we were ready to die.
Consistent with what you told the jury on direct examination.
I believe so, sir, yes.
Yesterday, Ms. Heath questioned you about the number of times you reported Mr. Ellis being tased when you were interviewed by Sergeant Brockway on March 9th of 2020. Do you remember that line of questioning?
I do.
With court's permission, I'm going to hand you with your markers. Plaintiff's 59A.
Proceed.
What's 59A?
59A is that transcript of the meeting with Pierce County Sheriff's Office.
That's when you turn to page 10 of 59A.
Okay.
And start at line 25 at the bottom. Do you see that?
Yes.
Start at page 11. Through line 14. Read that to yourself real quick. You recall Ms. Heath asking you portions of those paragraphs yesterday.
I do.
Was that the entirety of your statement that she asked you about yesterday about how many times the taser was applied in this case?
No.
Why don't you go ahead and read from page 10, line 25, and page 11, line 14, please.
So at that point, I came off the LVNR. I push him down, face down, and I move to his left arm. And I tell Shane, grab his right arm. So Shane goes to the right arm. But at this point, you feel the taser. We tried to cuff him under power, but you feel the taser lose that effect, and the guy comes back to. And he starts growling again, and his hands start kind of hulking away from us. So at this point, my entire body is around. I have both arms wrapped around his arm, and I'm just clenched on his arm, trying to move it to his back. And he's fighting us. And I feel Shane give him another round from the taser. So there's another cycle of the taser that happens. His body locks up, and we start to move in, and eventually we get him into handcuffs from here.
All right, at any point during your statement, did you indicate that there was one or two taser applications?
It sounds like I said there was two.
And that, did you say eventually we're able to control him after the taser application?
I did.
Consistent with what you told us under examination?
Yes.
You recall the line of questioning yesterday when Ms. Eads suggested that you could have gotten out of the car as Mr. Ellis was in the intersection.
I do.
Would you ever get out of the car and walk into the intersection in that circumstance?
Well, that particular circumstance, no.
Why not?
Because I didn't really have anything, again, and so he might have just run off, and there's just no reason for me to get out at that point.
Would you ever leave your car in the middle of an intersection while you're out of the vehicle?
Not unless it was an emergency.
There, have you ever left your car in that situation?
Not that I recall.
Is there a reason you wouldn't do that?
Well, first of all, it's just blocking traffic again. It's unnecessary. It's creating another hazard for other pedestrians, but it doesn't make any sense to do that.
Yesterday, Ms. Eads questioned you during that same line of questioning why you didn't activate your emergency light in that situation. Remember that line of questioning?
I do.
Is that appropriate at all?
Not at all.
Why not?
That's an illegal seizure.
Why is it illegal?
Because I didn't have a crime. Like I was explaining yesterday, once you activate the lights to a citizen, if they start, you're telling them they're under arrest. So you have to have a lawful arrest reason to do that at that point.
What would happen if you performed an illegal procedure as Ms. Eads suggested?
I'm gonna object to something like that.
Overruled.
Speculation.
I'll allow this.
How so?
Well, can you just perform illegal maneuvers whenever you want because the prosecutor suggests it's an option?
Absolutely not.
I'll allow the question. I'll allow it to stand.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't deserve to be a police officer. I wouldn't want to be abusing my power.
Yet, yesterday, Ms. Eads suggested that you told Sergeant Brockway in this line of questioning about activating your lights that there was a carjacking, right? Remember that?
Yes.
Turn to page 7 of 59 interviews. I want to review line 12 to the bottom of page 7 and the first line on page 8.
Okay.
Is that the area of the interview with Sergeant Brockway on March 9th where you're discussing what you think you're seeing in the intersection before you have contact with Mr. Ellis?
It is.
All right. And once you had to read line 12 through the first line of page 8.
Okay. So once we came to the stoplight, I was stopped facing westbound. And I looked over, and there was some sort of disturbance happening, where there was a black male in the center of the intersection. His back was faced to me, and there was a vehicle turning west on 96th Street from Ainsworth. And he was at the passenger door working the handle, and the vehicle was kind of trying to turn left, slowly move around him without hitting him, and then it took off. So at this point, I didn't know what we were reviewing. I didn't know if this was a domestic violence thing. Maybe this guy got kicked out of a car. Maybe he's trying to carjack it. I don't know. I didn't know. But at this point, now this gentleman's just standing in the middle of the intersection and just right out in the middle.
All right, I counted 3 times you said you didn't know what was happening out in that intersection, is that right?
That's right.
And if you don't know what's happening on the intersection, what are your limitations in officer judgment?
Well, I mean, I have to know what I'm looking at and what if I'm dealing with a crime or not.
Is that consistent with what you told the jury on the record examination yesterday?
Okay, I'm gonna object. This is argumentative.
Sustain.
Move to strike counsel's comment.
I've sustained the objection.
So if you didn't know what was happening out in the intersection, is it appropriate to activate your emergency lights?
No, sir.
Yesterday, Ms. Eakes challenged your testimony about clearing the previous stop at 96 and 8. Remember that line of questioning?
I do.
She suggested that you didn't articulate that in your March 9th interview with Detective Brockway. Is that right?
That's right.
Do you have any idea at the time you made the statement that that was an issue in this case?
No, I did not.
Do you have any idea that the state would suggest that it limited the time you would have interacted with Mr. Ellis?
No, sir, I did not.
This is leading an argumentative.
Sustained. As to leading.
Was that of any significance at the time that you gave this interview on March 9th?
It was not.
Did anybody ask you about where you cleared the stop on March 9th?
They did not.
Anybody ask you how you cleared the stop?
No, sir.
They had you get the clearance?
Yes.
Is that your practice?
Yes.
At the time you gave this statement, have you received any materials from Mr. Frederick's limiting the time frame?
No, I did not.
Object. I withdraw.
Yesterday, Ms. Eakes challenged your use of the LPNR under the use of force policy by the Fiscal Police Department. You remember that line of question?
Yes, sir, I do.
Can we pull up Exhibit 301, please? May I approach the witness with the hard copy of 301? Officer Collins, what's 301? On page 2, please.
301's our Tacoma Police Department procedural manual on use of force.
All right. Yesterday, Ms. Eakes said that TV doesn't authorize an LPNR. Is that accurate?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to that misstates the question that I asked. I asked for the reference that
I'll allow this question to stand.
Do you remember that line of questioning?
I do.
And she, Ms. Eakes, suggested it's not referencing in your use of force, right?
Correct.
And not allowable under TV policy,
Your
right?
Honor, I'm going to object again. That's a mischaracterization of what I asked. It's argumentative.
I'll allow the question.
I want you to read for us paragraphs 2 and 3 on page 2 of 13 of Exhibit 301.
Two and 3. Members of the department must generally employ the tools, tactics, and timing of force application consistent with the model's direction and departmental training modules. This model, while requiring the officers to maintain controlled superiority over a subject, supports the practice of progressive application of force as part of the continuous risk assessment process. Risk is assessed objectively based on the on-scene reasonable officer's perspective, taking into account the facts and circumstances of the particular situation that are known to the officer. Due to the fact that the officer/citizen confrontations occur in environments that are potentially unpredictable and are tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving, officers may use tools and tactics outside the parameters of departmental training. All such applications of force shall meet the same standard of reasonableness as those which have been previously identified and approved. No distinction shall be made relative to the age of the suspect regarding the use of force. Reasonable timing and tactics shall be the determining factors.
So does the policy explicitly allow you to go outside of your TV training?
It does.
And your training with respect to LPNR, was that outside the scope of TPD?
It was.
And did you think that was reasonable given what you were faced with Mr. Ellis?
Absolutely.
Consistent with this policy?
Yes, sir.
Yesterday, Ms. Eats asked you many questions about failing to report hearing Mr. Ellis say he can't breathe. Remember those questions?
I do.
Did you hear Mr. Ellis say he couldn't breathe?
I did not.
How were you supposed to report something that you didn't hear?
I'm gonna check.
Sustained.
How would you report something if you couldn't hear what something was said?
Same objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Can you report something you didn't hear?
Same objection, Your Honor.
Sustained. Let's move on.
Ms. Eats asked you questions about independently calling for medical aid based on the statements Mr. Olson was making here. Remember that line of question?
Yes, sir.
Under what circumstances can you independently call for aid when your sergeant is on scene in order to contact the break-in?
If I was not aware that fire was en route already, then that would be a reason.
And Ms. Eats asked you about not reporting it. Mr. Ellis said he couldn't breathe. Remember that line of question?
I do.
Did you report whether or not you heard Mr. Ellis say driving?
No, I did not.
Why did you not report that?
I don't remember him saying that.
Did you report that you told Mr. Ellis to put his hands behind his back 4 times without complying?
I did not.
Why did you not report that?
I don't remember saying that either.
Did you report hearing Sarah McDowell screaming?
I didn't hear her.
Did you report that either?
No, sir.
Did you report one of the things that you recalled her?
Yes.
Ms. Eats suggests you didn't report to fire your concerns about excited littering. Do you remember her asking those questions?
Yes.
Turn to page
Your Honor, I'm
13.
gonna object to that mistake questions I asked. I asked about other people that are not about fire.
Well, I'll let the question stand.
You remember that line of question about failing to report excited littering?
Yes, sir, I do.
Turn to page 13 of 59A, please.
Okay, I'm there.
Lines 5 through 12.
Would you like me to read it loud?
Sure. Is that what you were said to Sergeant Brockway on March 9th, shortly after this incident?
Yes.
Go ahead.
When fire arrived, I went up to the guys to give them a rundown and just said, you know, that I had time to kind of process what had just happened by then. And I said, hey, I don't know what's going on, but I think this guy might be excited delirium. Like, he's just kind of freakish strength, and he wasn't speaking to us. He's just out of control. That's what I told him.
Are you referring to Lieutenant Wilson?
I'm sorry, can you start again?
Are you referring in your interview with Sergeant Brockway what you told Lieutenant Wilson on the scene?
I believe it was who's now Lieutenant Wilson, yes. He wasn't lieutenant then.
Had you heard Mr. Ellis say, I can't breathe, as suggested by Ms. Eats, would it have changed how you handled restraining and controlling?
No, I couldn't have changed that.
Why?
Because again, I mean, it goes back to our whole discussion yesterday, but we have to restrain him first. And if he's now in this state of mind and he's standing up with handcuffs and he's at a disadvantaged position, we have to keep him down on the ground. So at that point, we can either put a bunch of officers on top of him to keep him down, or we can place him in hobble so he can't put his stand up. So
And had you heard him say, I can't breathe, when would have been an appropriate time to do something about it?
I mean, right away.
Once he's hobbled?
Yes.
And in your interview on the 9th, didn't you report that as soon as he was hobbled, someone said turn him on to the recovery position?
Your Honor, I'm gonna object again to reading.
I'll permit this one.
Yeah, I believe Officer Burbank instructed people to put him on his side.
Did you report that on March 9th?
I did.
Yesterday, Ms. Eats had you refer to 18A. Of course, you're going to come and take back 18A. Do you remember what 18A is?
Yeah, that's the audio transcript from their audio expert.
And Ms. Eats asked you specifically about the time frame in which it is where office, for this document, officer said, shut the fuck up, man. You see that on page 4 of 6.
Yes.
And what time is according to this document for what the purposes only that we read out of set?
23, 23, and 42 seconds.
All right. And Ms. Eat suggests that was related to Mr. Ellis saying he can't breathe. On page 3 of 6, what time is the document that Mr. Ellis said he can't breathe?
23, 23, 28.
So how long after Mr. Ellis says he can't breathe is the statement shut the fuck up?
So from 23, 23, 28 to 42. I'll let you do the math on that, but
So at least 14 seconds.
yes, sir.
Between the I can't breathe and shut the fuck up, how many unintelligibles are attributed to Mr. Ellis?
Sorry, I'm getting lost here. How many unintelligibles? You got 1, 2, 3.
Right. Any idea, any recollection you sit here what shut the F off was relative to?
No, I don't remember saying that.
Lastly, Ms. East asked you, I wrote down, quote, you were praised in your review when discussing proactive things. Do you remember that question?
I do.
That's not all you were praised in, is it?
No, sir.
Have you had accommodations and praise for your use of force as an officer?
Yes.
I'm gonna object, because this is not relevant, and that's why I just don't ask them only about the proactive police.
Well, she's opened the door by asking about your praise.
Your Honor, it's not necessarily related to the proactive policing, it's not relevant as to other things.
Overall, you may proceed.
Have you been praised for your police work at
Yes.
TPD?
Yes, sir, I have.
How many accommodations have you received for your work at TPD?
I'm not sure.
How many related to de-escalation and use of force?
I know one for certain, but I'm not sure of the others.
Did you receive the Medal of Merit?
Your Honor,
I did.
I'm gonna object, this isn't relevant, it's outside the scope. Your Honor,
Well, we'll excuse the jury and have a conversation about this. Ladies and gentlemen, please do not discuss the case. Thank you.
Your Honor, my objection.
Everybody can be seated.
Yesterday, I asked this one question about whether or not it was true that he was praised in his performance evaluation for his proactive police. It was discreet to that issue. The idea that Mr. Oster can say, well, you used the word praise, and you talked about, when you asked about a specific thing, somehow opens the door to all those other accommodations is simply not relevant, it's not accurate, And it's, certainly I didn't open the door on with respect to any of these other things. I also do have one other issue on the race about 18A and the way that it's being used in light of the way the court reconfigured it.
I'm sorry.
I have another issue with respect to 18A that I want to raise also.
Okay.
Judge, she chose to ask about praise related to on work duty in a fashion that fit her theory of the case. She doesn't get to limit his praise and accommodations by saying it was only with respect to proactive policing. I asked those things on a direct examination. Ms. Eads objected, then went into it on her own. She chose to do that. I now get to follow up on his praise for that limited scope that she suggested, because that's not accurate. And I might
What
say-
you're saying is that you're claiming that she suggested that he would have been more zealous for proactive policing because he was rewarded for it.
That's what her suggestion is.
And you're saying that's there's more to it than that.
It's not just proactive policing. In fact, the Medal of Merit, I think the court probably knows based on argument, was in fact awarded for de-escalation of somebody who comes at somebody with a knife that Officer Collins disarms and de-escalates. So it's exactly consistent with what I just asked him, that the state tried to limit the use of their person.
I think you tried to go into it on direct, and I wouldn't let you do it.
Correct, because the state objected to it.
Your Honor, I mean, it's apples and oranges. I mean, the issue of whether or not he was praised for proactive policing, and that's all I asked him about, is not related to whether or not he received accommodations for some other de-escalation. There's no connection between those two things. Proactive policing
well,
is simply going out and causing things to happen by making contact with people and developing criminal activity as a result of it. That's what the testimony has been, and that's what proactive policing is about.
Right, but when you tie it to the idea that he's received benefit from doing that, you're saying that he had an incentive to be aggressive about that. And what Mr. Oster suggested is he also had an incentive to de-escalate problems and so on because he got praised for that and rewarded for that. And so that counters this idea that the only thing he would get praised for is being an aggressive officer.
Well, that wasn't what I was suggesting in terms of the proactive policing, was that he had been recognized for that he was being proactive.
Right,
I don't
but the
think
point is though, is leaves whether that was your intention or not, it leaves the jury with that potential inference.
This is just character evidence, but I understand that the court's going to let it in with respect to Officer Collins. But I just note that.
Well, yeah, the reason why you understand that now is because now the logic of it has been made apparent.
I would disagree. I believe I'm very practical about where the court's going, and I hear what the court is saying about.
But you're announcing these rulings before I make them.
Well, you pretty much just said how you're going to rule, so maybe I was talking.
I didn't say that. What I do, if you haven't caught on by now, is there's a kind of devil's advocate thing here. I mean, I try to say, well, here's the argument that's being made. Show me where it's wrong. And when you do, then you win, right? But if you don't, then you've got a problem. So we go through that, and I do that to both sides. That's my style. Sometimes lawyers don't like it because they sometimes think I'm being aggressive towards them personally, and I'm not. I'm trying to get at the ideas or the principles in which they're trying to advance, and then sometimes they advance principles that are not really consistent with logic or rules of evidence or otherwise, and sometimes they do, and I've got to sort that out. So, yeah, I tend to think that under the circumstances, he's entitled to go there. So you said you have another issue with respect to 18A?
And, Your Honor, this has been the issue from the beginning with the way the court decided to limit what was on 18A. Counsel is now using 18A to basically say that Mr. Ellis didn't say I can't read, when he knows, right before the shut the fuck up, when he knows that the evidence and what the transcript said was at 23:41, Mr. Ellis, who made us change it to unintelligible, said can't read. And that's what I played yesterday. And then comes the comment of shut the fuck up. Now he's using this to say, well, these are just unintelligible. And that the time he said shut the fuck up was from previous time. And I just think that that's deceptive in light of what the court did in terms of changing the transcript. Obviously,
I don't have
the court said at
18A. Can you guess? Give me a copy of 18A.
If you recall, at the time, the court said, well, I'm not going to allow it in the transcript because you couldn't hear it sufficiently, or there was dispute about whether or not how strongly Mr. Hallamore could do it, and so you made us change that one comment to unintelligible, even though 18, which I'm happy to show the court, showed that he had made the comment about he can't read.
The context of using scales between the court is that was corresponding to the email from Mr. Hallamore saying, I can't understand what it is, but if your office is agrees to what it says, I'll add it in there. And then the court said, yeah, we're not doing that because I can't hear it. And I played it, and he played it for you 30 times in court, and he still couldn't hear it because it's unintelligible according to the court. So what I did was actually consistent with the court's ruling and finding, and not disingenuous or misleading.
Well, Your Honor, there was obviously dispute as to whether or not that was said. I can't find the first binder, but I'll hand that to the court, what we have marked as 18. And I think that, 18, obviously, the comment...
Isn't that what was that the little clip you played yesterday? That
Repeatedly.
No, that's
one of the clips I played yesterday.
Where you can hear breathe. Look. actually the testimony was.
Well, there was one that was really short, and I questioned for a moment whether it had been admitted or not.
No, that was 6:59. That was the dispatch that we
Okay.
also took out, which was at, the following, that was at 23:25:21.
Oh, well, that's after this anyway.
Correct.
Okay.
After that.
So we have the 23, 23, 28. I guess I'll just use the last two numbers, 28, which is can't breathe. And then we've got Mr. Ellis at 31, which is 3 seconds later, and it's unintelligible. Are you talking about that one, or are you talking about the next
No,
one?
I'm talking about the next one, right above Shut the Fuck Up Man.
Okay, so then
23, 23, 41.
41, okay. And you played that one yesterday, too.
I played all of that sequence. That's
Okay.
Exhibit 612.
Well, I don't know what to tell you, except you can use cross-examination. I mean, even your expert couldn't tell after going over it and going over it and going over it and going over it. And I couldn't tell.
Well,
So
I think that. I
you
think
may
the record-
be able to say, listen, ladies and gentlemen, it's there, listen to it. And one might even come back and say, it's so difficult to hear, how can you say that that's what he's responding to, even if it's true? As opposed to the fact that he's saying something when he's now engaged in a conversation with Mr. Hayes, or at least somebody is, because it says, Mr. Hayes, you guys need some help, officer, at 37 seconds. 39 seconds, officer, doesn't say which one. Oh, we got somebody coming. 41, another 2 seconds later, unintelligible. At 42, we have the shut the fuck up man statement by an officer. That Mr. Collins is saying is probably him.
Yeah, I just think that, of course I can do anything, but I just think it's not fair to use that when he knows what it said, and that it was taken out and changed by the court to unintelligible.
I don't know, that-
Sorry, I couldn't hear,
I mean, it's true.
I couldn't hear any of this. My hands are off, because I can't hear.
when he knows it's not true, is I think your point. And I guess I would say, I don't know that anybody knows whether it's true or not. The jury can make their own determination. You could say, hey, listen, he says it here. And of course, they could still believe, well, even if he did all, it could have been just, from the point of view of the officer who said it, it could have been just noise, or he could have said that and was telling him, as your position is, that he was telling him to shut up about that. Or it could be that it was just, again, noise that he couldn't hear, or he thought maybe he was making noise so he couldn't hear Mr. Hayes. I mean, I don't know. There's all kinds of possibilities there, and you're certainly entitled to ask the jury. Says, if you listen to this, you can hear that he's saying that, and then he immediately afterwards says, shut the fuck up, man. But whether or not that was I think we're all agreed that's Mr. Ellis's voice. What he said at that point in time is in dispute. And it could be you're right, and it could be you're not. So I don't know that makes much difference. So here's 18 over there. And as I say, when you go on redirect, you can, or recross, you can ask him about it again if you want. All right, let's have the jury back. One second. 10 minutes anyway. I'm just-
And I guess the commissioner don't feel like it, and they do it.
What's that?
I don't know.
You should know.
We're ready.
Well, this was Cedillo.
Yeah.
You should talk to him. Anyway. Okay. Okay, objection is overruled. You may continue.
Before we see what you're asking about using the metal merit. When did you use the metal merit?
I don't recall the date. I think it was around 2018, 17.
What's the metal merit?
It's an accommodation for police officers that falls somewhere under the. It's the I think the third highest Medal Honor, Medal of Valor, and the Medal of Merit.
What is the metal merit for in this case?
Officer Burbank and I were responding to a strong arm robbery at the 76 station at 84th and Hosmer Street. And in that scenario, the clerk guy had jumped over the counter and beaten him up, and then taken cigarettes and some money, I think. And then the guy left, and so we were there taking the report. And while we were there, Officer Burbank kind of was walking to the back of the store while he was talking to dispatch, running records. I was interviewing the clerk, and the assailant came back, and now he was armed with a 15-inch butcher knife, and he had it raised over his head, and he was coming at me, telling me to kill him. We were able to, basically, at the end of the story, we were able, when he turned his back, to get him safely in custody without hurting him.
And did both you and Officer Burbank report out there for de-escalating that service?
We did.
Thank you, that's all.
Recross.
Couple of questions. Officer Collins, is it your testimony that it's lawful for a pedestrian to be out in the middle of an intersection in the middle of the night?
It depends on the circumstances. I mean, they could be crossing the road, but not just standing there.
It wouldn't be, correct?
No, but it's not a seizable offense. I couldn't just go run out and arrest someone for that.
And it's your testimony that it's a seizure just to put on your lights, is that right?
It can be, yes, ma'am.
And you were asked about the St. James report. You recall yesterday when you testified, you explained to the jury that that St. James incident is the reason why you knew you had to use an LBNR against Mr. Ellis, correct?
That is correct.
And you explained that the individual in St. James was out of control, correct?
Yes.
And that you had to punch him multiple times, and you realized that you could just keep punching him, but he wasn't going to be able, you weren't going to get him to stop, correct?
I'm not sure punching, but striking him, because I know I did other strikes, yes.
Okay. And you also said that you then kneed him in the groin as hard as you possibly could, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you looked at the report from St. James, correct?
The specific parts that I've been asked about.
And you didn't review the rest of it?
I didn't read it all.
There's actually no reference in that report at all to you striking Mr. Sharp, is there?
I don't know if there is or not, but
I'm
I...
not sure to you yet.
Okay.
Any of what's been marked as 2755.
A second to read through it, ma'am. It's not specifically referenced, no.
There's no reference at all to you striking Mr. Sharp, correct?
There's not.
And there's no reference in that report to you kneeing Mr. Sharp in the groin as hard as you could?
That'd be the same as striking, man. No.
And there's no mention of you striking him or kneeing him in the groin, correct?
No, ma'am.
Okay, just a moment. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Pritchard?
Yes, hey, Judge. Officer, some more questions regarding the same. You talked earlier in both your direct examination and cross-examination regarding various levels of use of force, correct?
Yes, sir.
In striking a person is a use of force, correct?
It is.
You use your elbows, your fists, you knee persons in a level of use of force.
It is.
Taser is a level of use of force.
It is.
Where is the taser in relation to strikes?
It's lower than strikes.
So strikes is higher than taser?
Strikes, you deal with assaultive subjects, so
Yes.
that's a step up. Taser in Tacoma's use of force is actively resistant, so that's a step down.
And so you had struck the person, it didn't work, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, and he was responding apparently to the strikes he received.
Yes.
How was he responding?
By telling us to do it more and laughing and threatening us.
Okay, you did ultimately tase him, correct?
I did.
How many times did you tase the individual?
I think 3 times.
why don't you take a look at Exhibit 77, the last page 11 and 12.
Is it specifically stated, or should I
Well,
read?
take a look at the last paragraph, actually the last 4 lines of page 11 and the top part of page 12, and I need to ask you a couple of questions, Brian.
This is the incident at the apartment complex with Mr. Sharp.
Yes.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, so you better refresh your memory about the number of times you tased Mr. Sharp.
Yes.
How many times you tased?
3 times.
All right. Well, it doesn't reference that you tased him twice, and then you hit him with the arc switch 3 separate times?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how you're asking about it. So in that sense, because we were in such a close fight, I did what's called a staple. So you can fire your taser cartridge and then fire a second taser cartridge to make your spread, and then hit the arc button on the taser to actually tase. So if you're asking me, that'd be how many times I tased.
Okay, so how many times did you tase?
So it says here 3 times until he finally dropped to the floor.
What was the response that he gave to you upon being tased?
He said, "Oh yeah, that feels good."
Okay. Ultimately, though, you were able to cuff him.
Yes, sir.
All right. How was he cuffed?
How was he cuffed?
Yes.
So this was another instance. So it says, after getting him to the floor, we finally placed him in handcuffs. Soon after dropping to the floor, additional officers arrived on the scene to assist in detention. This was another incident, much like the night of Manuel Ellis' incident, where we were fighting for over 6 minutes at this point. So by the time the officers relieved us, we literally just rolled out, and there was like 5 or 6 officers involved at that point.
What did those officers do when they arrived?
They hobbled him, from what I understand.
So that he was not only cuffed, but he was hobbled.
That's what I understand, sir.
Consistent with respect to what Mr. Ellis.
Yes, sir.
And then after he was actually taken away to the jail, are you aware of how Mr. Sharp responded once he was there at the jail?
Yes.
And how did he respond once he was at the jail?
Yeah, it was bizarre. So as soon as we finally got him hobbled, and then he calmed down, so then the hobbles were removed, we placed him in our car, and he wouldn't say a word to us. And we took him to the jail, and I remember we asked for additional corrections officers because we had just been in this huge fight with him. And he's just totally calm, won't say a word to us. And he gets to the booking table at the jail, and as soon as those cuffs come off, he starts fighting the entire jail staff. And I think it took, I mean, there was at least 5 correctional officers, and people were tasing, and it was wild, but we were out of it by then.
All right, and you testified yesterday about the reason why a person remains cuffed at the scene, correct?
I believe so, yes.
To control the individual.
Yes.
Once the cuffs are removed, the individual is no longer in control. correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Is this an example of an individual who is in perfect harmony with the officers, but then becomes uncuffed and is completely chaotic?
Absolutely.
And is that why you did what you did with respect to Mr. Ellis?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Nothing.
I have a couple brief follow-ups, John.
Go ahead, Mr. Conrad.
So about this incident with Mr. Sharp, the initial call came out from Shirley, is that right?
That's what it looks like, sir.
Okay, I'm not going to try and pronounce her last name. She was 68 years old, it indicates here. She lived in that apartment complex.
Yes, sir.
And according to DOL, she weighed about 100 pounds, is that right?
Yes, sir.
She said that she woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning and heard her front door, someone at her front door, is that right?
Right.
She said she looked through her peephole and she didn't recognize the person that was standing at her front door, and the person was jiggling the door handle at that point.
That's correct.
And that was Mr. Shark at her door trying to get in
That is right.
at 2 o'clock in the morning for this lady living at that apartment.
Yes, sir.
And then about Well, 911 had responded, but he had left the Mr. Shark had left the location,
Yes,
and about an hour later at 3 o'clock, he returned to her door. Is that right?
that's right.
Okay. And then he started walking through the hallway, and he fit through an 18 by 18-inch metal door mail slot. Is that right?
That's what I was trying to explain about those old school little box slots on the bottom of the St. James apartment doors.
And he was able to crawl through that mail slot into that vacant apartment down the hallway.
Yes, sir.
And then you guys actually found the mail slot inside with him when you guys went in there.
Yes, sir.
And when you made contact with him, you said that he, right away, you indicate in your report that he appeared to be under the influence of some type of narcotic, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's what you write in your report back in 2017.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that he's just staring at you with this blank look in his face is what you also write in there.
That's correct.
And he says to you all, "What are you doing here?"
Yes.
And he started to grow in aggression towards you all. And then you discuss again trying to detain him in handcuffs. And he kept that distant stare towards you throughout that time period you indicate in your report.
That's right.
And one of the things that you also noticed during this is that he had a black weapons holster sticking out underneath.
Yes.
And why did you include that in your report?
Because once that struggle is happening, we have to assume he's going for a firearm that's in that holster.
Okay. And you later learned that actually he didn't have a firearm on him. There was like some USB charger or something like that.
Correct.
Okay. But that you took that into account during your struggle with him.
Yes.
And you even discussed being unable to just, you're grabbing one of his arms and being unable to hold on to even just one of his arms, you yourself.
Yes.
All right. And in this report, you actually quote Mr. Shark as saying after you used a taser on him, you quote him as saying, "Oh yeah, that feels good," and exclamation points after you're tasing him.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And in Mr. Burbank's report, he includes a couple additional details as well, right?
He does.
And he says that also Mr. Shark is saying when you guys are trying to take him into custody and he's being tased, he says, "Keep doing it, you'll love it," and other oddities is how he explains it. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right. And you talked about this Rolodex of experiences that you've had as a police officer that inform your training and experience. And this is one of them. Is that right?
This was a pivotal one, yes.
I wonder what would have happened to that lady that lived in that apartment had Mr. Shark been able to.
Instead of a comment,
I don't have any other questions.
Mr. Rosser? Zeeks? Okay. You may step down. Thank you. Okay, we'll take our morning recess now for 15 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. Please don't discuss case among yourselves with anyone else. And please avoid any reports in the media, social or otherwise, on the subject of this trial. this case, that it only lasted for a few moments before it went to a commercial, wanted to let us know about it. I asked Mrs. Winnie to inquire more specifically about it, and I believe he thought it was on Cairo television. And my understanding is that he did hear something about the trial. I got the impression it wasn't much, but some. I don't know if you want to inquire of this juror anything more about it than that. I don't know whether it impacts their view of the case in any way. But we can have them come out, and I did have Mrs. Winnie inform the juror to, one, make sure you don't say anything to any of the other jurors, and this juror informed us that that had not happened and would not happen. So that was good. I also had Mrs. Winnie inform him that we may want to talk with him about this. So he's prepared for that if it happens. Anybody want to question the juror? Ms. Fricke?
I think certainly we need to know, however you do it, that he can set whatever you heard aside and make sure we're here. That's a good issue, as far as I'm concerned.
Sure, it's an issue. You want me to bring him out to find that out?
I don't judge. In fact, he self-reported this, complied with the request from the court, giving me assurance he's going to do what he heard.
Okay. How's the state feel?
The defense doesn't think it's necessary, then we don't think it's necessary.
Ms. Fricke, what do you really, so do you want me to bring him out or not?
No, I said I don't really care how you do it. But,
Well,
you know,
but
I'm
by
cautious when it comes to those things, obviously. I've always taken a position that to know is better than not to know.
Well, by saying, I don't care how you do it, suggests that you want me to do something to find out whether or not, in my view, it impacts his view of the trial. And I don't know that that's an appropriate rule for me. So I guess the question is, if you want me to bring the juror out, I'll do it. If you
I
don't,
don't have any desire to ask questions specifically.
well, I could ask the questions if that's what you're concerned about. Usually what I would do is ask them the questions and then ask counsel if they have any questions after I've completed mine. But you may not want me to ask them anything. I mean, so everybody so far says no, except you, Ms. Fricke, and I respect that. I don't try to give you the tyranny of the majority here, but you can do it, you can go your own way. What do you want to
I've
do?
certainly been consistent in my positions on it, and they have as well. So I guess I'll remain consistent and just ask that you ask the question, you set it aside and leave it at that. And I assume he's going to say yes, or she, whoever it is, and we can move on.
So you do want me to bring the juror out?
For that very limited purpose.
Okay. Well, I will ask a number of questions. And after I do so, I'll ask each party, starting with the state, whether they have any question for the juror as well. And so I don't know where this might go.
What are the questions is the court intending to ask?
Well, so basically confirming what we already know to some extent, which is, you did self-report that there was an issue here, that you heard something on the news. Confirm what the source of the news was. As I said, my understanding was it was Channel 7, but you might tell me something else. Ask him if what he learned, I try to get some idea how much information, how long the duration of the report was that he heard or saw, and ask him certainly to what extent he thinks it would impact his ability to be an impartial juror here and influence his decision, if at all, and confirm that he hasn't talked with other jurors about it.
Is the court then intending to ask him about the content of what he heard?
I wasn't going to. Does anybody want me to?
No.
I suppose the only,
The defense doesn't want to. I'm just trying to get the parameters of what the court's going to ask.
Yeah.
So that we're clear if the defense doesn't want that.
well, somebody else could ask at consent. As I say, once I'm finished with my question, I ask the council if they want to ask any particular questions that they think might be raised by the answers that have been given. And if they do, I'm not going to necessarily have carte blanche, not everything you might ask, but chances are you'll ask something that'll be fine, and then who knows where it'll go. So,
I don't think we have any intention of making that, or asking that question.
okay, well, all right. My understanding is this is juror number 12. So would you have the juror come in?
Your Honor, can we make sure the microphones are on? It was really good this morning most of the time.
Well, as far as I know, they're still on. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you really well all the time, but they're out there the attorney, so we're not hearing the argument.
Ah, Okay, the defense's next witness.
Call Officer Rankin Sampson.
Yes, sir. Please come forward right about here and raise your right hand to be sworn. Solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you very much, sir. Have a seat right here. Please state your name and please spell your name.
First name Timothy, Timothy. Last name Rankin, Rankin.
Thank you very much. Mr. Conrad.
Morning, sir.
There you go.
Good to go.
So I'm going to talk to some background questions first. About you. So I want to ask you, where you originally born?
I was born in Singapore,
And what year were you
1988.
born? And how long did you live in Singapore?
Since I was born till I was about 13.
And who from your family was from Singapore?
My sisters and my mom.
And how many sisters do you have?
I have two sisters that are biological. The other two are stepsisters.
And can you pull the microphone a little bit closer to you? Okay. And so how long did you live in Singapore?
13 years?
So from the time you were born until you're 13 years old.
Yes, sir.
And what did your mom do for work?
She was a single mom, so she did many jobs.
And why did you guys leave Singapore?
My mom remarried to my stepdad, and he's American, and he decided to adopt us, and we moved to the U.S.
And where did you guys move to in the United States?
The first place we lived at was Atlanta, Georgia.
And did you attend school in Atlanta?
I did.
What grade?
I started out in middle school. I think it was 7th grade.
What was it like moving from Singapore to Atlanta, Georgia?
It definitely was a quite different. I think I grew up a little bit different than most Americans did. I talked differently. I dressed differently when I first moved over, so I wasn't really treated super nice.
Okay. What about, so was English your first language?
Kind of. Chinese and English is predominantly spoken in Singapore.
Okay. How's your Chinese?
Now, kind of rusty.
Okay. You still speak Chinese at home?
Yeah, with times with my family.
Okay. With your mom?
Yes, with my mom.
And so you're talking about being in Atlanta. What did you attend high school?
I did, but
Where did you attend high school?
that's in. I did some years in Arizona and some years in Virginia.
Okay. And what about any schooling after high school?
I did some college in Arizona.
Okay. And did you finish college?
I did not.
Why not?
I think for me, college was. I thought it would give me a purpose. I was playing, collegiate sport, but I didn't really find a purpose in it. I wanted to do something more of my life. Enjoyed the freedoms and the rights that were given to me when I first moved over here. I was proud to be American, so I joined the military
Okay.
without my parents knowing.
Okay. Without your parents knowing?
Without my parents knowing.
They get you in some trouble?
I mean, they found out when I graduated basic, and I sent them an invitation card.
How was that conversation?
I mean,
For the relevance of this.
So, how long were you in the military for?
just shy of 6 years.
And were you honorably discharged?
Yes.
And what brought you to Washington State?
I was stationed out here at Fort Lewis at the time in 2011, and then I just kind of stayed after I got out of the Army.
Okay. And are you married?
I am.
And how long have you been married?
Just over a year.
How long have you known her?
I say 10 years, but I might be wrong.
Okay. And you guys have a couple of dogs? Right?
We do.
I'm gonna object to relevance.
Sustained.
Okay, so you're talking about being in Washington State. I want to talk about when you first applied to become a police officer. Remember when that was?
I think it was back in 2018 sometime.
Okay. And what brought you to apply to become a police officer?
I think for me it was a career change for one. But when I was in the military out here, I spent a lot of time in Tacoma. I lived in Tacoma when I was in the military out here. So for me, I kind of wanted to give back to the community. You know, I think being a cop, you meet people at their worst time. And I also know Tacoma is full of crime, and I was trying to help with mitigating crime.
Okay. And do you remember how much you earned as a police officer?
Objection, relevance.
I want to ask you about the night of March 3rd, 2020. How long have you been a police officer at this time?
I think just over a year.
Okay. And when did you graduate the academy?
January 2019.
January 29th.
Yes.
And then tell the jury, take us through kind of after graduating what the next steps are.
So with Tacoma, after you graduate from the academy, you go through a bunch of classroom portions, a bunch of trainings before you start your FTO program, which is Field Training Officer Program. That's when you start actually patrolling the street with a training officer, and that lasts about 4 months or so.
Okay. And the FTO program, is that part of that? I think you heard testimony about the probationary period.
The FTO is part of it, yes.
Okay. And who were some of your training on?
I had quite a few, but Officer Burbank was one of them.
Okay. And so tell us about the probationary patrol period. How long is that?
It's a year.
And what is that?
So probation officers, when you first start out, you were put on a 1-year probation period. As new officers, as actually any police officer, there's quite a bit of a learning curve. So when you're in probation, it's for other officers to assess you, to make sure you can follow the laws, do all the policies and procedures properly, and basically be a safe officer without any risk to anyone else.
And do you remember when your probationary period ended?
I think it was January 2020.
Okay. So about a month prior to this incident.
Yes.
And you've heard about the area that you patrol on the night of the incident. Is that an area that you've been patrolling for a period of time?
Not really. When I was in the FTO program with Officer Burbank, I was in the Sector 3, which is what I patrol. So after I got off FTO, I was placed in the Sector 3. So I was only there for a few months.
In Sector 3 for a few months? Or
Yeah.
Sector
Sector 3 for a few months.
Because, am I right in thinking that the area where this incident happened is Sector 4?
it's shared. So with Tacoma, Sector 3 and Sector 4, because of the crime rate, we just call it the South End. Sector 3 and Sector 4 officers co-mingle. We go to each other's calls for the most part. So that area is, I think it's Sector 3 to be exact.
Okay. And so that's the area that you were patrolling on March 3rd, 2020?
Yes, sir.
And what shift were you working?
Graveyard.
And what hours is that again?
8 p.m. to 6 a.m.
And how long have you been working that shift?
A few months
Okay.
after I got off FTO program.
That's when you first started working graveyard?
Yep.
And did you have a partner that night?
I did.
And that's Officer 4?
Yes.
And how long have you all been partners?
I think it was like 3 months at that time.
Okay. So I want to get to kind of the, well, let me ask you this. So how old were you on March 3rd?
31.
And I want to ask about walking the jury through this incident from telling us about this fire stop that you backed up Officer Burbank and Officer Collins. Can you describe to us kind of your involvement in that fire stop?
So that traffic stop, it's not uncommon for other officers to back officers on traffic stop. It's quite common, especially in the South End. I think by the time we got there, I had stopped the car because I was driving that night. I think Officer Collins was the one that gave me a thumbs up, and we stopped, and then we just kept going because they were about to clear that call.
Okay. And so what did you do after you had left that scene?
After that, we just started patrolling the area. So this was, I think, 96 and A Street, A Adams Street. I started heading north on A Adams Street.
Okay. And so we've heard about these mice moves. Do you remember what you were doing directly prior to hearing these mice moves?
Yeah. When we were on A Adams Street, we observed, I would say, 2 younger white females that were kind of standing off the sidewalk. A Street's kind of a really dark street that's not really like any apartments. It's like the backside of all the businesses. So they were kind of out of place. A vehicle had stopped. It was a black Mercedes with super tinted windows. The girls just kind of jumped in the car really quickly, and the car took off. So we just started following the car before the mic click started.
Okay. And what was your concern about what was going on?
Besides the car just speeding off on A Street, we were wondering what was going on. I mean, the 2 females weren't really dressed. It was for the weather. I think it was like 40 degrees out and windy, and they weren't wearing jackets or pants or anything of that sort. So we were trying to figure out what was going on.
And then is it at that time that you hear these mic clicks?
I think we followed it for like maybe half a block before we started hearing mic clicks.
Okay. Tell us about what you remember about first hearing these mic clicks.
So I think it's been told before that like a mic click is not uncommon. It's like we call it an accidental mic click. Like someone accidentally hits their, like our hand mics has like a button on it, and you actually like bump it or you hit it and it'll go off. So the first one, usually we kind of disregard it because I think Officer Ford said someone would come on the air and say accidental or something of that sorts. But this night, the mic clicks kept going. 3, 4, and then dispatch said Henry 317, which is Officer Burbank and Officer Collins' call sign. And we just had backed them up on a traffic stop. And there was no response. So at this time, I think it was maybe going like 5-10 miles per hour. I was going pretty slow, just because we're trying to listen to what's going on. I turned up the car radio. We also have our headset our earpiece from our radio in our head so we can hear all of it. The mic clicks just kept going. I think we were up like 5 or 6 mic clicks before dispatch also asked another time, Henry 317, do you have traffic? And then nothing came out over the radio. And then finally, Officer Burbank came on the radio and just screamed out his location, 96 in Ainsworth.
Have you ever heard Officer Burbank giving out a location like that before?
I have not.
And have you ever heard, or have you been working with Burbank and Collins?
I have.
Okay. You guys had been working the graveyard.
Yes.
Have you ever heard multiple mic clicks from them like that?
No. I've never heard any mic clicks like that.
Okay. Like, as it...
As in my little time as a police officer, I've never heard any mic clicks like that.
Okay. And so what is the, I mean, what's going through your mind at that point when you're hearing that?
I think Officer Ford and I think we both, we knew it was a physical altercation just because of the frequency of the mic clicks, how many mic clicks. To me, as a new officer, it signified someone was trying to go for their hand mic to call something out, but they are unable to. So Officer Ford and I think we thought the worst. We thought, yeah.
So what's your reaction?
I think at this point in time I was at South 84th Street in like McKinley. I made a U-turn with activating my lights and made a U-turn really quickly. And I started heading as quickly as I could to 96 in Ainsworth.
Here's your emergency lights on,
Yes, and sirens.
and are you and Ford saying anything to each other on the way there?
I think there was a little bit of discussion back and forth about what's going on. But I think for the most part we were trying to keep quiet to listen to what all was happening over the radio.
Okay. So, walk us through kind of when you get on to 96. What's next?
Yeah, so the route we took from 84 and McKinley, I made a left-hand turn heading southbound on Pacific Avenue, and then a right-hand turn heading westbound on 96. From Pacific and 96 area, if you're going down towards Ainsworth, the elevation is slightly higher, so you can actually see all the way down to the intersection of 96 and Ainsworth. That's when I observed what I thought was Officer Collins's car.
Okay. Where did you observe?
It was stopped at the intersection, which is weird. That's not a good police practice that's taught to us. It was just stopped in an intersection with just its yellow embers on.
Is that how we've seen it in the photos?
Yes.
So it's in that same position when we first see it?
Yes.
Okay. And does it ever move from that position?
No.
Okay. And so, you're headed down 96. What direction are you headed down 96?
Westbound.
Or westbound? And you see the vehicle up ahead of you, is that right?
Right.
Okay. And can you see anyone in the vehicle at that point?
No, I think me and Officer Ford, I kept asking Officer Ford if he could see anyone. The whole situation is just unsettling. You don't hear mic clicks and then see a vehicle just kind of positioned in the middle of the roadway. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to us. So I just kept, as we kept driving, I kept asking Officer Ford if he saw any of the officers.
Okay. And at one point were you able to see anyone?
I think I'm guesstimating 3 or 4 blocks or so, but I had moved basically closer, like moved my car over closer to the curb. So we both kind of had a line of sight just past the patrol vehicle, and then I saw 3 subjects that were 10, 15 feet in front of the patrol vehicle that stopped at the intersection.
Okay. And could you make out who's who or what positioning?
I could not at that time.
Okay. And so, what are you guys doing?
I think before even the car stopped, Officer Ford kind of jumped out of the car and started running. Stopped the car as quickly as I could, called out on the radio, on my car radio, that I was with Henry 317, and then I took off running after Officer Ford.
Okay. And what do you see when you first get on scene?
So when I first get on scene, what I see about 10, 15 feet in front of me is now, well, we now know it's Manuel Ellis, or Mr. Ellis. He's face down in the prone position. Officer Collins is also in the prone position, trying to secure his legs while he is kicking backwards at Officer Collins. I describe it as violent, but and then Officer Burbank is kind of over his like hips, butt area, with his hands kind of pressing down on Mr. Ellis's back. And I think in my statement, the only way I can describe it is literally watching Mr. Ellis buck back and forth, and Officer Burbank looked like he was just riding a wild horse.
What Officer Burbank is essentially straddling the
Yes. Yes.
knees on either side,
Yes.
and Collins is behind him, holding on to his head. Is that right? Or attempting?
Yes.
And what do you and Officer Ford do next?
As we're running up, I think I was the first one to address both the other officers. I yelled out, "What do you guys need?" And I think that's when Officer Collins responded on the radio, "We need hobbles." And I explained to him that I don't have hobbles, I don't carry it. And so we just kind of made a plan to secure his legs with Officer Ford.
And have you ever used hobbles before?
I've never.
And where's Officer Ford, if you will?
I think he was maybe a couple paces in front of me, but I caught up to him pretty quick. So
What's he starting to do?
I think at this point in time, Officer Collins transitioned to his left leg, and I helped hold Mr. Ellis's right leg so that Officer Ford could also get down in a prone position and secure his right leg.
Okay. And where are you at this point in the operation?
I'm still behind Mr. Ellis, like by his legs.
Okay. And we're talking about this now, but how quickly are these things occurring?
Fast.
Okay. And what, if anything, was kind of unsettling about seeing Officer Collins and Officer Burbank?
Well,
Starting with Mr.
one, Officer Burbank is, he was my training officer, so, like Ford said, both of them are like the go-to two-man car in the South End. Everyone wanted to be like that, and so when me and Ford partner up, we tried to mimic ourselves as best we could to them, because it was, Officer Ford said it correctly, there was nothing they couldn't do. They handled every single call very well. They were very professional. It just dawned on me when Officer Collins was testifying, I've never heard Officer Burbank actually curse, which I think is quite remarkable. I know Officer Burbank and Collins, we connected on the military front just because we all were in the military. We all did very similar jobs. So that's something we definitely connected on. I know, Officer Burbank has told me when he was in the military all the stuff he did, and he was put in for the Bronze Star of Valor. That's not something.
Hearsay and relevance.
An objection comes pretty late. I'll let the answer continue, but let's move on to a new question.
Understood. So seeing them, these two experienced officers struggling with Mr. Ellis obviously plays a factor in what you're seeing.
Yes.
So you were talking about Officer Ford being on one of Mr. Ellis's legs, and Officer Collins, is he on the other leg as well?
Officer Collins is on the left leg, Officer Ford's on the right leg of Mr. Ellis.
And what are you doing?
I helped secure both legs. I was on the right side of Mr. Ellis. The way he was thrashing about with Officer Collins, Officer Burbank, it did not appear to me at all that he was handcuffed. So the first thing I thought about was, we got to get this guy in cuffs. So as I transitioned up his body, I started off kind of working up his leg to where his hands are, and that's when I noticed that he was actually handcuffed. And right below his handcuff, kind of by his waistline area, was a Glock magazine. Being around a little bit of firearms, you can identify a Glock magazine pretty easily.
And you talk about that in your statement.
Yes, I do.
And why did you mention that?
It was concern. We didn't know who it belonged to. It was just kind of laying by where his hands are, where he's handcuffed. So we don't know if Mr. Ellis was armed at that time.
Okay. And so you noticed that Mr. Ellis was handcuffed at that point in time. So what do you remember doing next?
Yeah, at that time, I made sure that because he was handcuffed, I wanted to make sure that he wasn't going to break out of his cuffs, or just make sure they would double lock. With handcuffs, you double lock them so they don't cinch down on people. Also, it gives it just an extra security so they won't come apart. And as I was doing that, Officer Ford grabbed the Glock magazine and kind of just yelled out, "Whose magazine is this?" And no one responded. And then I just saw him throw it off to the side.
Okay. And what do you remember Burbank doing then?
Officer Burbank was asking for help at that point in time.
Okay. And what did you do in response to that?
I told him that I'm on my way up, or I got you.
Okay. And so what did you do at that point?
When I started helping Officer Burbank, I kind of situated myself on the right side of his torso. I think I had just placed my right knee on his right shoulder, and I kind of just formulated a plan with Officer Burbank that I was going to take the right side of his body, of Mr. Ellis's torso, and Officer Burbank was going to take the left side of Mr. Ellis's torso.
And is it just the four of you there on scene at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
I think Sergeant Lim gets there pretty quick after.
Okay.
I think Sergeant Lim gets there pretty quick after.
And so, do you know other officers are on their way?
I can hear the sirens.
Okay. And so, what's the goal, I guess, of taking those points of contact with Mr. Ellis?
I think in my head I was just trying to think of how's the best way to control Mr. Ellis when he's thrashing around the way he was. Is kind of just splitting his body into 4 different parts and holding 4 different points on him.
Okay. And what happens to, what do you remember happening to Officer Burbank?
So right after we made our plan, Officer Burbank, I see him start to get off Mr. Ellis, the way he was positioned with Mr. Ellis. And then I see Mr. Ellis just kind of buck his chest up. And then the next thing I see is Officer Burbank goes tumbling into the street, just right on the front left side of Mr. Ellis. And that's at the point in time where I had to move myself on top of Mr. Ellis.
Is that what you're describing in your report there?
Yes.
Or, I guess, in the interview?
Yes.
And so, tell us about kind of your positioning at that point.
So when I just watch Officer Burbank get bucked off, the only thing I think in my statement I say, I just jumped on top of him and placed both my knees basically center line of his back. So on his spine, my left knee on his lower back, my right knee in between his shoulder blade. I think I was more specific about it in my statement, saying it was his spine, base of his neck area. And I also describe it as moving all my weight, but I don't think you can move all your weight with multiple points of contact on the ground.
And what, What's your concern, Officer Burbank?
Just how strong Mr. Ellis was to just simply kind of jerk his chest off the ground and buck an officer off of him.
Did you think that Mr. Ellis was going to get up?
There was a fear that he was going to get up.
And
Now,
sure.
I know Mr. Fricky's got a call he's got to make here, and so we've got 2 minutes to noon, so we'll take our break at this point. So, ladies and gentlemen, please not discuss case among yourselves or anyone else, and please avoid any media reports on the subject of this trial. Thank you very much.